Welcome back to the final episode of the 12-month video game repair challenge. It's gone by so quick. I started this journey 12 months ago and I really wanted to find out whether or not it would be worth it to repair stuff as a side gig in 2024. Well, let's find out. Let me go over the rules really quick for any newcomers. First off, no debt. I start with $0 and I need to repair and sell items that I already have to make enough money to buy new parts and new items to fix. The goal is $10,000 in sales by the time I'm done too. Number 2 is I have a maximum of 7 hours a week to do any testing and repairs. Number 3 is there's no cost for supplies and tools I already own. And number 4 is to share everything. One summary video each month until the 12 months are done. Now, some new items I just got in. Before I jump into some fixes, I just got in some new parts to use from XYAB that I wanted to show you. Alright, because I destroyed the last one, I got another replacement cable for that GameCube controller, that Spice controller. Got some new joysticks for N64 units. I've got a few of these that are sitting around. They look like they're really loose. I'm going to try out these and see how well they work. A couple 2DS chargers. More of the Wii panels that are replacements. This is a really interesting one. It's a replacement cable for a Sega Genesis controller, and I happen to have one that is in really rough shape. Hopefully this will fix it. Now, these are probably hard to see, but these are the battery packs for Xbox 360 controllers. I needed a bunch of replacements because they were just missing. Speaking of missing, these are PS2 controller cables for charging them. I have a bunch of those controllers, but I don't have any of the charger cables. Also, speaking of missing pieces, these are the original Xbox quick disconnect ends. I forgot to get these the last time. And then these are just regular Genesis Model 2 AV cables. I used them up on my last couple sets there, and I just needed a few extras. Now on to fixing the leftover stuff. First up is the GameCube with the damaged controller cable. I really wanted to try to save the Spice Orange plug-in, but sadly it's just not possible. I have the black replacement, which I'm sure will work just fine, but it just doesn't have the same color. Oh well, it still fixes it. But this one is as easy as the original Xbox controllers I've been doing this year. It has a connector soldered directly to the main circuit board, but before I got into that, I did some cleaning first. This one's not nearly as bad as some of the others that I've done this year, but I still find it good practice to give the insides a quick wipe down before fixing anything. The 6-pin connector gets desoldered from the top of the board, and the new one gets soldered into its place. Pretty easy, right? Oh yeah, except for when you need to go put the housing back together. The cord isn't exactly a drop-in part just like the Xbox controller version. It has to be wound up into a bundle like the old version in order to fit in place nicely. I rummaged around and found a small zip tie in my toolbox that should work for this. You basically just need to make a loop with the cord. That way it doesn't put all the tension on the solder joints and instead provides tension on the cord insulation. Try to make it look like the original as best as you can, and then push and hold it in place while matching up with the rear housing. It's a little fiddly, but I got it eventually. And once I tested it, it worked great. I just got in this cord as well, so I might as well fix this other 6-button Turbo Genesis controller while I'm at it. The cord insulation is bad and it's separated from the joint just past where it exits the housing. I found a good replacement to use from XYAB and got to soldering in all of the colored wires. I would remove a few at a time and solder in new wires right after so I didn't forget which ones go where. It didn't take too long before I had them all finished too. Got the button pads and contacts cleaned up and I went to reassemble it. Well, you could say that's an issue. The wires aren't long enough for them to fit in this housing properly. Maybe I just need to solder them in into the backside? That might help give it a little extra space. I made a quick diagram on where everything went and resoldered everything in place again. And it's still not long enough. It looks like the red, yellow, and the green wires are just slightly too short yet. And so is the brown one once I checked it again. So I grabbed the old wire bundle and cut patches for these colors that I installed with some heat shrink tubing after splicing them together. I added a little Kapton tape to keep the bundles in place, and it just barely fit into the housing. But I sealed it up and it was working well once tested. I don't know why these things need to be so hard sometimes, but this is an aftermarket controller. On to some more old news. See this? This one was fixed previously and just needs a little bit more cleaning. But when you flip it over, I found out the lower housing is cracked and the battery pack won't stay in place. So it's a good thing I have some spare rear housings from the ones that I wasn't able to fix earlier in the year. I swapped it as well as removing a few other spare parts and it was good to go. This one has a non-responsive bumper and I cleaned and dripped some IPA into the button and it felt fine afterwards. When I popped the housing back together, it felt and sounded weird again. I'm beginning to wonder if these housings warp over time, and that's what causes some of these issues with these bumper buttons. I've seen this a few other times now, and they always seem to work once the housings are screwed down tight. Yeah, I guess it's something to look for with your own repairs. I know I've shown this one before, but it's just such an easy swap. This one had a little stick drift, and I had already cleaned it once, and that didn't work at all. The only way to really do this is to grab some spare junk controllers and raid the potentiometers from them. You pop out the bad one and swap in a used one from another stick. It's super easy, and there's always still that risk that it won't work perfectly, but if you clean the parts before installing, there's a much higher chance that it will. And thankfully this one did as well. The last 360 controller has a problem with the click in on the left stick. This could be just some dirt, since the controller could definitely use some cleaning, or it could be the button attached to the stick for the click in went bad. I cleaned everything and dripped some IPA into the stick parts. Must have just been dirty because it worked great after testing again. Another old item that needs a cord swap. This shell is in great shape, and it would be a shame to waste it. Good thing I have a controller that's broken that also has a good cord. Since it's not being saved and it's already cracked, who cares what happens to it? A little prying later and we have a cord that can be used in this other one. These cords are all plug and play, so it was super simple to swap them out. I saved the extra button pads from the damaged controller and tossed the rest of the junk housing parts. On to the next one. I want to take a little look at that weird QuickShot NES controller that I had gotten a few months ago and see what was wrong with it. Turns out the buttons appear to be a bit sticky because it just does this. Maybe it just needs some cleaning. It seems pretty clean inside though, but buildup on the button pads can happen. I cleaned everything really good and was getting all the black coating off the pads too. I checked to make sure all the connections looked good after cleaning and reassembled it for testing. Well, that's some progress, I think. In order for it to not move and pause, you have to hold a few buttons in at all times. Not exactly a fix. I checked to make sure everything was attached correctly, but ultimately added this one to the scrap pile since I had other stuff to do before the end of the month. Like, check out PCBWay, which is the sponsor of this repair series. Get an instant quote in minutes by going to their main page and selecting a few options to start. From there you can pick from many other options, including the type of material you'd like to use, or even the color of the solder mask. Your quote will be updated as you go, and you can be sure that the right customizations are in place so it suits your needs perfectly. PCBWay is also currently running their Christmas Big Sales event, where you can save up to 50% off through the end of this month on qualifying orders. You can get access to free Christmas coupons to use on your next order, Christmas-themed prototype discounts, and more. Be sure to check out the link in the description, and a big thank you goes out to PCBWay for sponsoring this repair series. On to some more fixes. The Xbox 360 with the stuck disc tray. Now, I've already swapped this drive band on this unit before, but that just didn't fix it for some reason. So let's open this thing up and see if there's another issue to address. But the inside of this one was insanely dusty. Dust everywhere, so maybe that was causing some of the issues with the connections on the disk drive. Well, we'll see. The drive wasn't as bad as I thought it might be, but it certainly wasn't good. Still pretty dusty, so I gave it a good cleaning and made sure that the tray was inserted properly and not jump in the track or something weird like that. Alright, I got this thing all blown out. All the dust and everything is all nice and removed, and it's looking pretty clean. So I cleaned this up, but now I have the opposite problem of the disk drive not sticking. It'll just keep spitting itself out. So I'm wondering if there's two little contacts on either sides of these. I'm wondering if one of those contacts, specifically this one, is causing it to continue coming out or staying in because it's not touching over on the side. I'll show you in just a second. All right, here it is all open again. So this one here and this one here have little itty bitty contacts, and if they don't touch when this carriage is fully seated or open, then it doesn't detect it. I had this on a Philips drive for an original Xbox earlier on in this challenge, and I just needed to clean these contacts and it worked out great. So I'm wondering if I just do the same thing. All right, I was just looking at this thing and I just had an epiphany. I'm wondering if it's actually the band. So this is the band that was in there. I used one of the other replacement ones, but I think I grabbed the wrong size. Now I put in a smaller band, and look at this. It's closing, and it's opening. So it's making that full travel path across both sides, and I think that was the problem all along. Who knew? I played a few games with it, and the disk drive was working great. I guess I just need to pay closer attention to my spare parts. Now on to some DS's. This pink one's buttons aren't testing the greatest and probably just need some cleaning. There seems to be a common theme with many of these repairs. Cleaning is a big portion of fixing stuff. I opened it up and gave a good scrub to the buttons and the pads. There was some debris on them, but not a lot. It should be working much better now that everything is clean inside. Also, for those of you that have a hard time putting DS lights back together, try this. The little black wire that needs to feed under the cartridge slot can be a real pain to get in place sometimes. But if you tie it off with some extra wire, I'm using some magnet wire here, and feed that through first, it makes this process much easier and will save you a boatload of time too. This one was working way better now that it was cleaned, so on to the white one. This one had a similar issue, but it was with its bumper button instead. The same process applies to this one as many controllers. Soak the buttons with some IPA and work it in by pressing down the buttons rapidly. Thankfully for this one, I didn't need to take apart the whole board to get at the buttons. Just the bumpers themselves, which can be tricky, but if you use some tweezers to pop the spring out of place, you should be good. This one is also working well now too, so on to the last DS Lite. This one has dirty card slots and isn't able to play any games. Too bad my cleaning cartridge doesn't fit into the slot, but good thing I have these other parts that went along with the cleaning cartridge. I think these are for cleaning a cartridge slot on a Super Nintendo, but let's just see if they work here too. I add a little IPA to the end of the pads and rub them on the pins of the advanced slot. This obviously worked since it got a lot of dirt off of the pins, and after some testing, it started right up too. Another one fixed. This is another cleanup item from last month that has a destroyed charging port. I picked up a few new ones on Amazon, so let's see how difficult it is to swap one of these. I've never opened up a 2DS before, and I never realized how many tiny screws these things have. As soon as I think I found them all, I found another one. Also, these little ribbon cables terrify me since I broke the top part of one of them off on that DS Lite earlier in the year. Initially, I didn't want to remove them at all, but I feel like I should just to make it easier to remove the power connector. This unit also isn't very clean, and that's not helping this process either. I'll clean it up once I know this is going to go positively, but heating that connector is a slow process. Not only does it have 4 through-hole connections on one side, but it also has 2 surface-mounted spots on the other. So getting to these is a little tricky, but after some heating and wiggling, the old part popped loose. I did a little cleanup of the area and test fit the new part. It looks like it'll fit well, maybe slightly longer, but that's okay. The one thing that I'll have to do is modify these rear legs so that they can be surface mounted on the rear of the board though. Currently they are straight, but they need a small bend in them to lay flat. My tweezers fixed that, and after some careful bending, they fit into place perfectly. I soldered it in on both sides and it looked really good. I cleaned as I went along and reassembled the unit for testing. I just need to be careful when reinstalling those little ribbon cables. I let it charge for a while and came back for some testing. Alright, the 2DS is running, but I'm having issues with the cameras, so I looked it up really quick and it said do a quick software update, see if that fixes it. If it doesn't, then I gotta reopen it and see if I can adjust either the ribbons or potentially get replacement parts for one of the cameras, because they might need replacement. So I'm gonna let this sit for a little bit, see what happens. Well, update's finished and it looks like I'm gonna have to crack it open again because I got another error. So that's fine. I'll take a look at this camera and these and see if maybe I just didn't connect them up right or something. I put this one off to the side for now since I was testing games and came across this game that wasn't working correctly. NBA Hang Time for N64. The pins on this one were looking pretty dirty, so I gave it a quick clean, but wasn't really happy with it since the pins weren't looking super bright yet. So I brought out the old scratch pen again and really buffed them up to make them look a lot better. I'd be really surprised if this one wasn't working still. Hey, look at that. On to the next one that could also use a lot of cleaning. I haven't even tested this nasty looking Super Nintendo yet, but I was assuming it had some other issues based on what the outside looked like. And the inside isn't terrible, but certainly isn't great. Lots of pet hair on the power switch and just some dust bunnies floating around everywhere else. I did a quick swab of everything before moving on to the main game connector, which also had some hair and debris in it, but it came pretty clean once I was done. I popped a few parts back together for testing and tried it out. Alright, let's see if it turns on. And nothing. Or I forgot to plug in the power pack. That's kind of helpful. It's actually plugged in this time. Hey! Oh. Alright, here's my good unit. And just to test it, Super Mario World is working on the same cable, on the same power pack. So it's definitely not that. It has to be the console. Alright, I cleaned the cartridge slot again, and then I also installed the screws on either side there in order to just hold it down, make sure that it was all together, just in case that wasn't connecting very well with the cart connector there. So we're going to try it again. I just cleaned it and see what happens. Okay. Same thing. Okay, new game. What is this? And it's in color. Everything is good. So I don't understand. All right, just for giggles, I opened up this Mario World copy and it is in impeccable shape. Save for the case being cracked, which has been for a while and I accidentally did that. But look at these pins. They're in really good shape. I mean, there's a little bit on the bottom there. This other side, great shape as well. I'll clean it up just to make sure and test it out again, but that is the weirdest problem. I cleaned my already nice looking copy of Mario World anyway, since the Jungle Book worked, so why wouldn't Mario World? It has to be the game, right? All right, I put the lid on to stabilize it a little bit more. And still nothing. So I've been doing some reading and I'm thinking maybe replacing the caps will help with this unit because it is pretty clean. It doesn't really have any other issues that I can see of on any of the other chips here, so I'm going to try that. But this is the kit that I bought for the last one from last month, and I just realized that I bought the one where it was nothing but leads instead of surface mount ones and leads. So this will be fun. I also found out that if you replace this cluster here of the capacitors, those directly relate with video output. So it's possible that these could be the culprits for the potential issues. So I'm going to replace these first without getting into the other ones and see if that potentially fixes the problem. So I swapped all the AV caps and tested it again. All right, it turns on, but it still does this. And black screen. So at least I didn't break it. I've already come this far, so I might as well just finish out the rest of the swaps, right? I even did the sound module, which wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. But after testing it again, I found the same problem. I did some further digging online as to why a good-looking board might not work with some games, but work perfectly with others, and found some bad news. Turns out if the CPU goes bad, this is a textbook example of what it does. I've never found a bad CPU, or at least something like this before, so I guess it makes sense. This board is still in great shape, so maybe when I get a hot air station someday, I'll swap the CPU from one of the others I've got laying around into this one. Until then, it goes to the scrap heap. Speaking of scrap, I've got 3 fat PS3s now that aren't working. One sounds like a jet engine and overheats immediately, and 2 don't do anything at all. I know precisely nothing about PS3 units. I wanted to at least get a little educated about them to see if fixing these was something doable or if they were just scrap. After doing hours of research, I found 2 of the most common issues are the power supplies going bad and the CPU's thermal paste drying up, which also causes overheating and the yellow light of death. So the one that sounds like a jet engine that overheats is most likely due to failing thermal paste. Now these other 2 just beep and shut off, which might be related to the CPU and the thermal paste, or it could be the power supply. I wanted to open these up and see if swapping the power supply from the jet engine might make these work again. First, let's see if the power supply fuses are intact, which is a really cheap fix. And of course they are. I probed a few other spots on the board that looked like it might have a problem, but they were all good. So I swapped in the other working one to test out the system again, and this is what we got. All right, here we go, other power supply. Now, the light blinks, and when you hit it, it just shuts off. So, this is exactly what the first power supply did, and now the good power supply from that other fat unit doing the exact same thing, so it must have some other hardware issue within here. So I'll have to look up some possible solutions. Those possible solutions involve something called a D-lid and thermal paste reapplication, which after looking it up is a very lengthy process that can even brick the system if not done properly. So on to that last one while I ponder if I want to try that process or not. This one unfortunately had a different version of the PS3 power supply, but after doing some internal testing, passed all of the quick checks as well. So maybe this one needs the same process done to it as the others? A proper D-lid seems to be the answer to many of these issues. But since it was towards the end of the month, I won't have time to look into that sadly. But I did just have a random pickup of some stuff that will take me right up to the end of the month. I just had a rather unexpected pickup. I got all of these for about 72 bucks, and all of them have various issues. I'm gonna end up having to look through them. But this one has some random button issues up on the top here. This one's probably a bad cord. No idea and no idea. So I'll test these, take a look, see what's up with those. But these are should be pretty easy fixes, but we'll see. Now all of the game gears Some of these have corrosion, I believe this one does, but the rest of these are actually in pretty decent shape. The outer shells are in good shape, and it looks like the screens are also in good shape, but I'll have to crack them open to verify. This one's interesting though, because the screen has already been replaced before, because it's got one of the flat glass screens in it. So that would be interesting to see what this one looks like inside, and if maybe it was potentially recapped already. But I have a little bit of work ahead of me for these 6, because I don't know if I have enough cap kits to support 6, so I'm gonna have to go buy some more of those while I fix up a couple of these other things. So it's a good win. Well, I'm just testing through the Sega Game Gears, and this one, I don't know if you can see that right in the middle there, it's missing a pixel. So I'm not going to work on this one. I'll put this one off to the side since I just want good screens. But if I have extra cap kits, maybe I'd do this one and then just list it online, make sure people know that it has a little missing pixel there. But yeah, I'm gonna go on to the next one. Hopefully no more missing pixels. Well, so far I have 2 that are good, and this one, that is not coming back from that, because those are screen rot things. All right, I got 3 to work on, and which is perfect because I have 3 cap kits left. I'm gonna have to order more of these. The last one, the last Game Gear that I have to test, has some corrosion issues, but I might be able to still use it as a replacement if the screen is good. But we'll get these done first and see about that one when the new caps come in. If you'd like a full recap of these, check out this video right here. For the most part, these went fine and they turned out nice. This is the first one finished, and even though the screens on these still don't really look great, it is fixed. But this next one I had a few issues with. Well, ran into a little snag because these pieces right there fell off the board because they were so badly corroded, they just fell off. But I was able to polish them up, and I just need to take a few of these pieces from one of the other donors. So I'm gonna go through my spare parts and see if I can find a couple of good parts to pop in there. All right, I managed to find a few transplants, so hopefully they can fit on here. I used a lot of flux to make sure these were going to be held in the right locations, and got them all into place without any lifted traces or broken pads too. After testing, I had 2 good working units, and the third displayed a black screen even if you adjusted the brightness. So maybe the bulb went bad? I have plenty of other bulbs, so I swapped in one and tested it again. It was slightly better, but it just had this ghost image yet. I tested the board all over and couldn't find any issues with my probing, so maybe one of the chips went bad. Not sure, but I'm fairly certain the screen is still good. And there's something that I've always wanted to try. This may be a bad idea, but I only have a little time left in this month, so I might as well try it out. I have another unit with a junk screen and a good board that I worked on earlier in the year, and wanted to see if it was possible to swap screens between this unit so I could at least get one more good unit out of it. If not, I guess I'm buying aftermarket LCDs. I carefully removed the broken old LCD to test to see if I could do it without damaging it, and it didn't turn out the best. So I need to be ultra slow on the good screen. I tried adding some flux to the pins to see if that would help, and it seemed like it did. But what worked even better was adding some slight pressure from the backside. This way the pins didn't fall off completely from too much heat in one area. Add a little flux, remove a few pins, and repeat until it's completely off. I reheated the pins on the good screen just to get them a little bit straighter, and moved on to prepping the board. I removed all the old solder and added on some new stuff on top, but just not a crazy amount. Then I centered and tacked down each side of the ribbon for the LCD. While I was heating each pin, I pushed slightly with the tweezers just to make sure that they were adhering correctly. I cleaned up the flux and added some Kapton tape to hold the ribbon in place and tested it out again. Well, not exactly what I was going for, but I was right. This was a good screen. Oh well, I guess new LCDs it is. I finished up the 2 good units with some front glass screen protectors and called this project done for now. I need to pick up a few more cap kits to finish out the others, and obviously some LCD kits now too. Maybe that's a project for next year. But I spent 1 spare hour on the last day of the month just cleaning everything because man, my repair area looks bad. I've just been throwing stuff everywhere. So I feel like it's a fitting end to this challenge by cleaning up this mess and organizing it a bit. I even went through some of my scrap bins and decided to sell off some of the stuff that I know I won't need again. But it was still a few $100 of random parts and pieces, which is great. Whew. And for those of you who are wondering what this is, it actually is a model of Terminator. So it's a Metal Earth model. I started it, I haven't finished it. It's been sitting on my desk this entire time. Maybe I can actually finish it one of these days, now that the challenge is going to be complete. So back to the ultimate question. Is it worth it to do this? And where did we get? Well, here's the final numbers. Just sold this Xbox 360 bundle with a brand new drive band for 75 bucks. This N64 unit that I cleaned months ago just by itself, 55 bucks. This Xbox 360 controller with a brand new cable, 33 bucks. This NES bundle that pretty much comes with everything and adjusted 72 pin inside, 110 bucks. A NES console just by itself with an adjusted 72 pin inside of this for 65 bucks. Just sold this NES bundle for about 105 and just sold this controller for about 25. Just sold this Xbox bundle with no clock and a new band for 125. Just sold this refurbished Game Boy Color for 85 bucks and its partner for the same amount. Just sold this black Xbox 360 with the replaced band for about 90. This pink DS Lite for about 50. And sold this other white one for about 40. Just sold this other pink DS for about 50 bucks. Just sold this controller for 27 bucks. This copy of NBA Hang Time went for about 20 bucks. Just sold this Xbox bundle for 117, this Xbox controller for about 30, and this Xbox controller for about 30. And the grand total of all of the items that I sold over the last 12 months was $10,262.98. We did it. Now, if you subtract out all the purchases and the fees, we're left with the total of $5,410.69 in profit. I am super happy about that. The fact that I made any money in this entire challenge to begin with is super cool. But to hit over $5,000 in profit is fabulous, and I'm really, really happy about it. Now, the total amount that I had repaired was $13,086.43. That's pretty amazing. And I fixed a total of 346 items. I worked a total of 318 hours out of the 365, which gives us about 47 hours to play with at the end. Now, I just couldn't do those last 47 hours for one reason or another. Just way too busy, holidays, I ended up getting sick multiple times over the course of this past year, so we just have to be happy with 318, I guess. I purchased a total of $3,355.59 worth of stuff. And that stuff is either repairable items, tools, or even replacement parts for those items. Now, I definitely paid for some of my education by buying some of the wrong items or buying some of the wrong spare parts or even tools. Now, the total fees that I had incurred throughout all of this was $1,496.70. That encompasses any sort of shipping or eBay fees or payment processing fees for selling all of the items. But in the end, I still made almost $5,500 on repairing stuff part-time for 318 hours of work. That's pretty good. Now, if you break down the total number of hours into what I had actually ended up fixing and listing for sale on eBay, it ends up being almost $42 an hour. $42 an hour. Now, I'm just a regular guy in his basement just fixing stuff. I have no formal experience. I've taught myself throughout this entire process, but $42 an hour? That's amazing. Now, if I split it out for the profit, it's obviously a little bit less. I only ended up making about $17.02, but I'm still pretty happy about that. I know everybody probably has the exact same question in mind. What are you gonna do with $5,500 of extra income that just dumped into your bank account? Well, first off, I bought these little wireless mics, which are fabulous, and I have another transmitter on my camera over there, which is awesome. I also bought a couple other random things for repair parts and other stuff like that, because I still want to continue to fix some of the items that I have yet to actually finish fixing. Like, for instance, I've got a 2DS behind me that I just have a lot of other work to do on yet. And I'm sure there's going to be other replacement parts that come up, and I'll buy those at that point. But honestly, what I did with the $5,000, I paid bills. Now, would I have made as much if I didn't save up all this stuff from previous rummage sales and other items that I had picked up over the last several years? Probably not. If somebody was starting from scratch and doing this out of their house, just like I am, and setting up a table and buying all their stuff separately, they can basically just self-fund their entire process. If you don't want to spend a single dime of any of your money on anything else, if you just start with one item that's very small, repair that, wait until it sells, and then use the profits from that in order to kind of leapfrog throughout the whole process, I think it's completely possible for somebody to go from $0 all the way up to 5,000 or 10,000 like I had done. And I encourage anybody else who's watching this video to do this exact same thing. Clear out your basement, clear out your shelves, have it emptied out, sell out everything else that you can't fix to somebody else who can potentially use it for spare parts, and get to that 0 point where you don't have any other stuff just sitting in the basement or sitting in your garage or wherever you happen to store items where you could be using it for something else. It empties out a lot of mental real estate to not have to worry about all of this stuff that's sitting in the basement for me, and it's been a godsend going through all of this. And seeing the sales over the months is really encouraging. Now, was this an easy challenge? I would say no. I really needed to push myself some days in order to continue to repair stuff. There were days that I just did not want to do it. I can't say that every day I woke up and I was like, yes, we're going to do 8 hours of repairs later on today. That's just not going to happen. But there were days where I was very excited to get back to it and see what I could do in order to fix specific things like the Xbox units. All in all, you just need to figure out how much bandwidth you have and what sort of hours you can dedicate to it. If it's only an hour or two a day, kind of like what I had done or what I had intended to do, then it works out great. Now, the ultimate question is, do I think it was worth it? I would say yes. I really enjoyed this entire process. Going through stuff, learning new items, looking up different problems, finding different solutions, and talking with the community like you guys in order to help bring me to conclusions on a lot of other stuff that I really didn't have an understanding about. And the community is fabulous here. You guys have suggested multiple items which have actually worked out really, really well for me. And I really, really appreciate all of those comments and words of wisdom. Massive thank you goes out to everybody who came along in this journey. And if you're new here, start at the beginning of this series. You might like it. Thank you again. I appreciate all the help and support over the last several months, and I'll see you guys in 2025. I'm done. Well, not really. I still have a few more random items like those PS3s and the 2DS to go through, but I'm just going to call it done. Now that I think about it, I do have 47 hours left in this challenge. Huh.